Most people think of closed guard as a single position. Either you have your legs crossed around your opponent or you don't. A lot of practitioners learn techniques from the closed guard without understanding that those techniques only work in certain variants and certain grips from the closed guard. As a result, especially in the beginning of someone's jiu-jitsu journey, you might see someone trying to force submissions that aren't available, chase sweeps from the wrong angles, and then feel like their closed guard isn't working or just at a total stalemate with their training partner, and especially in competition. Today we're going to break down closed guard into a bunch of micro positions and then show how each of them naturally leads to specific attacks, sweeps, and transitions. In a previous video, I talked about how jiu-jitsu can be seen as a map with more and more specific positions. Today I'm going to do a breakdown of the closed guard and all of the paths that lead from it and within it. This looks like a really complicated map, but I promise you it's not. Fundamentally, one distinction of the closed guard that you absolutely must know at all times when you're sparring is whether your opponent is kneeling or standing. If they're kneeling, you're going to have a much greater chance of being able to attack them. But of course, there are different ways of attacking someone when they are standing. It's just going to usually be a little bit harder. So we're actually going to break down the standing first because I actually think there are more limited options. Usually when someone has stood up in your closed guard, it means that they had started with offensive grips or they had frames against you in order to be able to stand up. Usually that comes in 3 variations. 2 hands in the armpits. They're usually like holding your collars together and then they have a sleeve, or they have a 2-on-1, meaning they're like pinning one of your arms with 2 of their arms and they were able to stand up using that frame. When this happens, usually you just need to get rid of those offensive grips in order to start attacking. Otherwise, your partner is going to be able to open up your guard and start to pass and get past your guard. If your opponent does not have those grips, or you are able to break those grips on their way standing up, there are some direct closed guard attacks or attacks where you don't really have to open up your guard too much or take a big risk from when your partner is standing. Those are what we call direct closed guard attacks. Usually those come in 3 variations. One is that muscle sweep where you put your bicep underneath your partner's leg. It's kind of like a low hip bump almost and you push them over. Or you have a cross sleeve. The cross sleeve is usually some variant of what I learned to be called a sleeve omoplata. And then finally, the classic double ankle sweep or dummy sweep. You'll see a lot of white belts get caught with this. Not to say it doesn't happen at higher belts, but most of the time, someone who's good at standing up in closed guard, they're going to lead with 1 foot and the double ankle sweep won't be available. But I just put that there since I think a lot of white belts might be able to catch this. And then finally, if you don't want to attack directly in the closed guard or you don't have that cross sleeve or muscle sweep grip available, then really your only option is to transition into the open guard. And so at this time, before you open your guard, your hands must be making the grips to the next open guard you're going to make. For a lot of people, that might be double sleeve or collar sleeve, or they might be looking for a pants grip so they can transition into something like De La Hiva or X guard. Now let's talk about when your opponent is kneeling, and that's probably how most of us imagine what closed guard actually is, although closed guard does entail when your partner is standing and you have the closed guard. But when your opponent is kneeling, then your main goal is to maintain posture control or to keep them from being able to stand up. And then in addition to that, launch an offensive sequence. One of the low-hanging fruits that we have is if they're leaning back a little bit, or even if they're sitting straight up, then you can go into hip bump variations. I find the hip bump to be quite difficult to do at a higher level, but you know, it's happened at ADCC, so definitely we don't want to overlook it. But the hip bump will also go into dilemmas and trilemmas of using a triangle or a kimura to chain together. When your opponent is not leaning back and a little bit more careful with your posture, they're looking for their frames, then there's 3 main grip variations that we can use in the closed guard. The one that is probably taught the most in no-gi is the overhook. And the overhook is a great way of controlling your opponent's posture because their arm and shoulder are stuck inside. Then they have to get rid of the overhook in order to stand up at all. From the overhook, usually the attacks that we see are the armbar, flower sweep, triangle, and omoplata. In the gi, there are still a lot of people who play the overhook, but another common system that you will see people play is the 2-on-1. The 2-on-1 is when someone has a grip on the armpit and a cross sleeve grip. Usually when someone has a 2-on-1 and they're able to drag the arm across, that's also an amazing way to control the posture. Usually when someone has a 2-on-1, they're looking for things like the back take and the flower sweep. Finally, in the gi, another offensive way of breaking down your partner's posture is to have collar and sleeve grips. When you have a collar and sleeve grip on the same side, all of your weight and power is on one side of your partner's shoulder, and it makes it very difficult for them to control that side more than you're already controlling it. I focus less on this because it usually requires the person on bottom to open up their closed guard, so you start to enter open guard, and that kind of leaves this map about the closed guard. But from the collar sleeve, usually the first sweep that a lot of white belts will learn is the scissor sweep, but then from the scissor sweep, we'll have things like the triangle and the omoplata, and then once your partner is free from the closed guard or they put their knee in the middle, then we'll be transitioning into the open guard. This was just a really quick overview of how I look at the closed guard and how I map it out in my mind. If we do something as simple as ignore whether our partner is sitting or standing, that changes the available correct decisions that we have to make in a live situation. Like I was talking about in my original jiu-jitsu map video, positional awareness is one of the first things that I recommend white belts start to develop, because when you know where you are, then you can decide where you want to go. There's a really popular quote in Alice in Wonderland where Alice is at a crossroads and she meets this cat, and the cat asks, "Where do you want to go?" And Alice says, "I don't know." And then the cat says, "Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go." In jiu-jitsu, it very much matters which way you go, but you need to know that you want to go there. Hopefully this map of the closed guard helps you know where you're starting from and then where you want to go. If there are other positions or open guards you want me to break down, or even if you want me to get even more specific in certain systems in the closed guard, such as the 2-on-1 or overhook, please let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.